Good. So I'm just going to give a bit of a snapshot about cricket science through an AI lens, and just to follow on from the previous speaker, but just to really talk about the how in terms of where and how AI can particularly assist from a cricket science perspective. Now, when we look at the game of cricket, it's mainly inter and transdisciplinary as we've come to know it, and it's really become holistic, especially in terms of player management, through various aspects of performance in coaching, biomechanics in motor control, medicine in nutrition, psychology and morphology, fitness and conditioning, vision and skill acquisition, and various other disciplines. But one of the key disciplines that has really emanated in recent times is AI. But the one thing I have to share is that John McCarthy was the father of AI in the 1950s. So as much as we think just because ChatGPT has come to the fore, and now AI is now the big thing, it has actually been spanning a number of decades. But because the hype is here, there has been a number of integrations of AI within the sporting perspective, and within the cricket perspective, we're going to see more integrations of AI going forward. So I just want to paint a picture in terms of where performance is going. And what I've done is I accumulated the average team scores of the ODI World Cups from 1975 to 2023. And when you look at this graph, if you start in 1975, approximately the average team score was 215, and right now in the current World Cup as of last night, it was, even after the DLS turn, it is 329. And so there's a slight increase of average team scores from the first World Cup till now. And if you compute a linear regression analysis to predict where it could go within the next 10 years, by 2031 it shows that it could potentially go to an average score of 418. Now that's a bit of a it's a monstrous figure, but with all the evolutions and the way in which batting has been evolved, it is potential. But I potentially think it will still be in the late 300s, but I might be wrong. So what you see here on screen is a race by Usain Bolt. So I want to give a snapshot from another performance perspective when he ran the 100-meter race in 9.58 seconds. And when they crossed the line, you would hear two sounds. And these sounds are very close to each other. They basically go beep, beep. And when they cross the line, many would think that those sounds is the difference between Usain Bolt and the second place runner. No, the difference is between the first place runner and the last place runner. And that's because a 100-meter race that's run in seconds, the first place and the second place runner there's a difference of split seconds. So if this guy who's third and he's getting a bronze medal, he couldn't get a silver medal because he was split seconds slower. And he couldn't get a gold medal because he was also split seconds slower. And so when you're running this kind of races in seconds, they are competing over 4 years to run at the Olympics, not to have a second advantage, but to have a split second advantage. And that's the difference that performance at this kind of sport, at this kind of track, can really have. So there's a reason why I'm telling you about this. It's because performance is measured in such minute seconds or minute time frames, but it makes all the difference. So I took this further and I populated a chart to understand where was the 100-meter race ran in the last 100 years. So if you start in 1920, it started at 10.54 and it improved over the century as you went on. So if you also compute a linear regression, it tells us that the 9.58 second record would have only been broken in 2040. But it was actually broken in 2016 because something after 2000 happened. Now, many are going to argue and probably say it's doping. Doping prevalence probably increased after the year 2000 or many other factors. But the reality is that we have just become faster. And so we are actually ahead by 20 years than where we currently are in sport performance. Not just in athletics and in track and field, but in most sports, we are 20 years ahead of our time. And records are going to continuously be broken. So that's 10.54, and this is the record by Usain Bolt at 9.58 seconds. And so after 100 years, also if you look at females, in 1920, the time was 13.6, and 10.54 is the record by Elaine Thompson. And so it took females 100 years to become 3 seconds faster, which is a bit of a big gap. But for males, it's a difficult one to comprehend. After 100 years, it has taken males to only become 1 second faster. So in 1920, it was ran in 10.54, And almost 100 years later, it's in 9.58 seconds. 1 second faster over 100 years. So these kinds of races, as we know, is not measured in seconds. It's measured in split seconds, and we can look into that over time. So we have to ask ourselves, what is happening with the other races? And very similarly, if you look at the 800-meter freestyle world record time progression for both men and women, there's a similar scenario. Swimmers are actually swimming a lot faster. And if you put a line of best fit, we can see that there's a continuous decline, which means they are getting faster over time. And so records are meant to be broken. And athletes today that continue to perform at a high level are a few decades ahead of their time. But the question is why? Why are they ahead of their time? And so there are a number of reasons, and it's multifactorial to answer why they're potentially ahead of their time. And one of the things is that we're currently working within a stage of mass sport participation. We have far more players that are participating at a recreational elite level compared to yesteryear. So we've got a lot of people who are participating in sport, both male and female. And so what we have is that we have all of these players that are trying to compete at a higher level, and we now have a funnel. And all of these players are entering into that funnel, and they're on the spectrum of between mass sport participation to talent pathway. So a lot of these players who are in this mass sport participation pool are trying to become elite players or try to take the sport as high as possible. But the problem is that it's becoming really difficult. And from these athletes who are going through the funnel, there's only a handful who are becoming elite athletes. There's only a very small handful that are becoming elite cricket players from thousands and thousands who are playing at the recreational level. And the answer to that is that the system has made it really competitive. It is a lot more competitive now to make it as an elite athlete compared to a few decades ago. And that's why things are getting better, things are getting faster, records are being broken, athletes are either becoming stronger, faster, quicker, etc., irrespective of other factors of doping, technology, etc. And so that brings in the question, if that's where we are right now, can AI take it a further step within the next decade or two? And so I wrote this op-ed in the Mail and Guardian where I argued that AI cannot replace human expertise at this stage. And rather, it offers 6 different E's. And that is, AI to the human expert offers enablement and extension, empowerment and enhancement, and education and ethics. So these are the 6 E's that we need to be considering when working with AI. So whether you're a medical doctor, physiotherapist, SNC, video analyst, performance analysis, etc., AI can be there to augment, to amplify, or extend, or enable what you do, but it will never be there to replace you. And the reason why I have to say that is because the human expertise is still very important. So I want to explain that through this particular a true life scenario that happened in real life. The pilot landed the plane in the Hudson River in the United States of America. It's based on a true story, and it was communicated by a movie called Sully, in which Tom Hanks plays the lead pilot in that movie. And so what happened is that after they took off, there was a bird strike. So the birds crashed into the engines, and they lost complete control of the aircraft, and they couldn't carry on. And they decided to land the plane in the Hudson River. So they were thinking that they could turn back and land in one of the landing strips nearby, but they found out that they would have been on a lower terrain and they might have crashed into one of the nearby buildings. And so they landed in the Hudson River. There were minor injuries, but there were no fatalities. There were no fatalities, but minor injuries, and everyone survived. But the NTSB at the time, the National Transportation Safety Board, found this to be very unconventional in aviation. And so they held a commission of inquiry in the US to understand what really happened that day. And with their pilots, they ran simulations. They ran computer simulations to understand that after the bird strike, could one of those pilots return and land on one of their nearby landing strips? And they found out that they could, that they would have been able to turn back and land. But long story short, Sully came out in their commission of inquiry and said, well, did you guys consider the human factor, the human expertise in that particular situation? Because it took them about 5 to 10 seconds to interpret and gather what they needed to do after the birds had hit the engine. And their pilots who ran the simulations, they were told immediately after the bird strike to turn back and land in LaGuardia Airport or one of the nearby landing strips. So when they reran the simulations and delayed the bird strike to turn back after 5 or 10 seconds, they found that the computer simulations would have hit one of the buildings. They would have been on a lower terrain and they would have hit one of the buildings, which means that Sully and his co-pilot took the better decision, a brave and courageous decision, by landing the plane in the Hudson River. And so that is explained by two theories, and that's explained by the expertise theory and metacognition, which we very often see in sport. And so the expertise theory it demonstrates how skill and talent develops and emerges over time, practice, and repetition through experiential learning, strategy, knowledge, and application. It documents how individuals become experts in their domain or field through a process of cognitive task analysis and portrays the necessary skills and expertise more robustly, effectively, and efficiently than novices. So Sally portrayed the expertise theory, but what he also portrayed were various psychological concepts that we teach athletes in sports psychology, aspects of self-regulation, self-awareness. He had a very high self-reflection, high self-belief. And when you merge these psychological concepts together as one, it is defined as a theory of metacognition. And so AI, at a very high level, is not going to give you the expertise theory or metacognition. And so even with those simulations, you still needed an expert who has been a pilot for a few decades with a lot of experience, with expertise theory and metacognition to make that kind of decision. So we can conclude from this, before I carry on, is that AI is there to assist, enable, empower the human or the expert. And so the human-AI partnership is really important, especially when it comes to the sports sciences. So if we unpack this a little bit further, there's an iceberg model, because right now when we work in cricket, there are things that we see, what we know and what we apply, but underneath the surface, there are things that we don't see, what we don't really know, and what we don't apply. So if you go specifically and see, well, what are the things that we do see, know, and apply? Well, we have player monitoring and analysis, athlete monitoring systems. We understand the vast discipline of injuries, and we've had a lot of discussions around that here, including concussions, etc., performance optimization, and more. So there's quite a bit of things that we do see, know, and apply. But if we go back and we go to the surface, we want to understand, well, what don't we see? And just to further on from the last speaker, there are aspects of AI that can assist in cricket in terms of real-time player monitoring. And I see that we're going to have a lot more automation from an AMS perspective to really understand monitoring and analysis in real time. Predictive analytics, not just analytics from a generic overview, but more tailored and individualized predictive analytics as a team and as a particular player, as well as personalized performance optimization. And if we go back and if we want to understand, well, what don't we know at this point of time, we will be able to look into individualized and optimal training loads for each player. And in addition to that, the impact of different cricket techniques on performance. So AI is not there to replace us. It's there to work with us. It's just like a tool. It's like a calculator that the mathematicians used a few decades ago, and everyone was scared that mathematicians were going to be replaced. AI and GPT is our calculator, it's our tool, and it's important that we use it so that we can amplify the work that we do. And then lastly, what we don't apply. AI can be there to improve the decision-making processes during matches, as well as pre-matches and post-matches. And AI-powered injury prediction models can be used to identify which players are most at risk of injury based on their individual workloads, and a number of parameters such as performance and injury history, as well as even nutrition markers as well. This information can be used to develop personalized injury prevention programs for each player. So that's the way in which we could see, know, and apply AI from a cricket science context. And so the future research that we're focusing on now moving forward is largely on an innovation and tech perspective with cricket, but also integrating aspects of AI. So I did speak about this yesterday in my talk, and what we're doing is integrating sensor-based technology to look into performance. And so this particular sensor attaches to the distal end of the cricket bat. And it basically clips onto the cricket bat while the player is playing, and we're able to see a lot of aspects in real time via the mobile app, and a number of parameters from bat speed, speed at impact, backlift angles, and a number of variables that are really critical in understanding what's happening with the player in real time. Further to this, we're looking at integrating EEG in performance analysis and to really correlate the understandings between brain activity and biomechanics. Now, that would be a very complex system. I mean, there's a lot of complexity in trying to integrate biomechanical analysis with EEG, because EEG cannot be done with abstract movements, and it's mainly valid and reliable if the movements are not too abstract. But this is something that we're trying to see. If we can integrate AI to limit the kind of interruptions and the interoperability, are we able to merge the analysis of both biomechanics and neuroscientific analysis, especially among cricket batters. And another exciting one is integrating virtual reality. We're looking at to see if we can simulate certain performance markers to understand how cricket batters and how cricket players can perform. But in addition to that, we're also looking at other sports, in particular tennis. And my master's student right now, David Copping, is integrating the use of the FIFA 11 Plus injury prevention program with virtual reality. There's a program called Sense Arena.
We are short of time, please.
Almost done, almost done. So we are looking at virtual reality basically to look into injury prevention and performance. And lastly, we are looking at developing a cricket GPT, and that's going to be a lending tool and a lending aid towards video analysis and performance analysis. So a lot of the things that are taking a lot of time for video analysts working with teams, this basically saves time. It becomes a lot more efficient. So something that you wouldn't be able to go onto ChatGPT or Bar to get the information. It has to be very specific towards cricket and a lot of the data that will already be available from various archives and libraries. So in summary, the application of AI in cricket science presents immense opportunities for coaches, players, doctors, scientists, analysts, biomechanists, engineers, and the entire cricket fraternity. By leveraging AI technologies, cricket stakeholders can make data-driven decisions, optimize game strategies, and enhance player performance. However, it is crucial to strike that balance between AI's capabilities and human expertise. AI should be seen as a tool to augment human decision-making rather than replacing the human expert entirely. Ethical considerations is really key here, as well as privacy concerns and the interpretability of AI-generated insights, and also the need to be addressed to ensure the responsible and effective use of AI in cricket. So apologies for going over the time, but I thank you for your attention.
Thank you.